Good Shabbos. This week's portion is Vayechi. In Vayechi, we have Yaakov right before his death calling in Yosef, his son, and giving a blessing, a bracha to Menashe and Ephraim, the two children of Yosef. And when you start reading the passage in Vayechi, you realize this is very similar, and there are many parallels between this story and the story of Yitzchak giving the blessings to Yaakov, his son. But there's a major difference. In the story of Yitzchak, it says Yitzchak was not able to see. He was blind, or at least his sight was diminished. And Yaakov came in without telling Yitzchak who he was, and he lied. He said, "I'm Esav, your firstborn." And he tricked Yitzchak into giving him the blessing. And at the end, it says, "V'yechar Yitzchak charad gadol ad mo." Yitzchak trembled tremendously when he realized what he had done. He didn't take it back, but he did tremble when he heard and he understood that he had given the blessing to the wrong or unintended son. Now, Yosef comes to Yaakov, and he's also bringing his two sons, now it's the grandchildren, in for a blessing. And Yaakov is blind, and when Yaakov seems to be giving the blessing to the wrong child because he puts his right hand on the younger son and his left hand on the older son, Yosef says, "Oh, lo chen avi, it's not, you've got it wrong, my father, because this is the Bechar, this is the firstborn. Put your hand on his head, your right hand on his head, excuse me. Vayemoyin aviv, his father refuses, and he says, Yadati v'ni, Yadati, I know. Gam hu yelam, so too will he be a nation. Gam hu yigdal, he will also grow up. V'ulam, but his older brother will be the one who will be the sort of more in charge, more the authority figure." So Yaakov is really saying, hey, you might think I'm blind, but I know what I'm doing. I could almost see a twinkle in his blind eye saying, I know what's going on, Yosef. Don't think I'm a fool. I'm not like Yitzchak, who was fooled, who really didn't understand who was supposed to get the blessing. I know exactly what I'm doing. And if you think back, this might really reflect what happened with Yaakov giving the Ksonas Pasim, the coat that he gave Yosef, which in a sense is the beginning of all the troubles that Yosef and the brothers went through. And there's an undertone in all of this discussion was Yosef upset that Yaakov treated him better and gave him preferential treatment, which caused all of this trouble? And you could imagine that Yosef might have said, you know what, Dad, this is not the way to go. It didn't work the first time. I'm not going to do it again. I don't think this should be done. And Yaakov says, no, I know what I'm doing. And the difference between Yitzchak and Yaakov is that Yaakov does it knowingly. He's saying to his son, now, I knew what I was doing when I gave you the coat. I knew what I was doing when I preferred you over your older brothers. And I know what I'm doing now when I'm giving the main blessing to Ephraim over Menashe. Not only that, here it's in front of them. It's very different than Yaakov and Esav. Each one is going in separately without the other one's knowledge. And now, no, they're both in front of me. I'm telling them, this is what I see in the future. This is my preference for whatever reason it might be. And I think the reason might be that we see that not only does Yaakov know what he's doing, but he's in a sense saying we always have to have certain almost rebelliousness. We have to always look for change. We always have to look for growth. We can't always fall in what the tradition tells us. Now, of course, that later on changes, and there's very strict rules in the Torah about what happens with the Bechar, with the firstborn, versus the other brothers, and we fall into a tradition. But there's something about the foundation of the Jewish people where Yaakov is putting in this idea of don't necessarily sit tight with what we have in the past. Don't always think that you have to just go smoothly from one generation to the other generation without any transition. Sometimes there's a need for change. Sometimes we have to look for somebody who has perhaps potential greater than would be expected under the normal traditional roles that are played in a family, in a nation. And Yaakov was saying, I understood this. I understood that it has to be different. That's why I took the blessings from Esav. I knew that it had to be me. Of course, Rivka also told him it had to be him, but he had already bought the birthright from Esav. I knew what I was doing with Yosef. I know what I'm doing with Manasseh and Ephraim. And when we're establishing with Jewish people, we have to understand that it's not always going to be the oldest son. It's not always going to be the one who you think deserves it. It's not always might makes right. It's not always your position in the family. It's something which is earned. It's something which is different than what you expect, because we know that people are able to grow and move past what the traditional role in life might be. And that's how we really establish a people. We have to be able to constantly be assertive, be somewhat, be willing to change, be willing to progress, be willing to look to a future which doesn't necessarily completely reflect the past. That doesn't mean then we don't have to then fall under certain conditions and certain rules. We do, but that's the tension that always exists, the tension between following the rules, following what came before us, and looking forward to change, both in ourselves, in our family, and in our community. Good Shabbos.